Liam.
What's up?
Oh, I just wanted to make sure you knew you were on this call. This is intentional?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that work? Mike working, Matt?
Who's Mike?
Mine, TK.
Oh, I'm just kidding.
Oh, you didn't see the lips moving?
That was a poor attempt at a joke.
Oh, I get it now. It wasn't bad.
My name's Matt, not Mike. So, something like that.
See, I'm a little slow. I get it. That is actually a good joke. Okay. That's it. Camera and mic are going off now. I have nothing on the agenda. I got 3 screens going. I can't find my mouse. Not a comment.
Itch, how are things in the cities?
Not bad. Can you hear me as well?
I can hear you working from home still. Are you guys in the office again or what?
We're working remotely. It's been one of those things where we we have enough offices around the country where we can't set sort of a standard practice for the company wide, but we're starting to filter back into the office here and there, but largely still remote.
Is your guys' office downtown Minneapolis? Or
No, it's out by the airport.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Public Works Finance and Safety Committee meeting of Monday, August 17, 2020. Roll call, please, Kristen.
Okay, Albertson. Absent. Euler.
Here.
Hoyer.
Here.
Pauline.
Here.
Lallam. Absent. Manti. Absent. Rudemsky.
Here.
We'll go back to Manti.
I'm here.
Okay. Roby.
Here.
Billhauer.
Here.
Y.
Present.
Thank you.
All right. Did you get Adam? Adam just walked in the room.
No, I didn't. Adam, you're okay. Lallam.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, so we're missing one, but he may log in. All right. The next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. Have a motion by Holeen and a second by Bueller. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. I see Councilman Albertson has just arrived for the record. So can you note that, please, Kristen?
Yep. Thank you.
All right, everybody's here. The next item on the agenda is public input. We're having some feedback.
Madam Chair, it's Liam Culhane.
Go ahead, Mr. Culhane.
I just want to briefly address you and the city council. I have some concerns regarding First Avenue South, and I know that I've emailed you, Madam Chair, about them. This is the block between the courthouse and the old post office, which would be my office building.
Sure.
There is a lot of pedestrian traffic, and there's a lot of sort of what I would call near car wreck type incidences. And I just have some, concerns about that, and I'd like to bring that up so at a later date we could get it on the schedule, discuss maybe some potential solutions, perhaps a four-way stop at First Avenue Southeast and South Maple, perhaps a pedestrian crossing mid-block First Avenue Southeast.
Okay, so we do have this on the agenda for the council meeting under new business. It's on the posted agenda.
I apologize, I didn't know that.
No, that's all right. Do you want to wait, or did you want to say something more about it now?
Is it today's meeting?
Yes, at the 5:30 meeting.
I'll just, I won't bother take any more of anybody's time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak about an item not on the agenda? All right, seeing no one, we will move on. The next item is approval of the agenda. I have a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Lallam. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by saying nay.
Aye.
Was that a nay?
I was aye.
I don't think so. I'll ask again. Is there anyone opposed to the approval of the agenda? If so, signify by saying nay. None opposed. Motion carries. Item 6 is the regular agenda, and A is the first item, approval of addendum number 1 to the professional services agreement for services associated with the airport terminal design, project number 1927, with Mead and Hunt in the amount of $48,455, authorizing the mayor to sign all applicable documents. Have a motion by Lallam and a second by Holeen, and I will ask the Public Works Director, City Engineer Heath Von Eye, to tell us about this, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. The addendum before the council tonight relates to the design contract that we have with Mead and Hunt. There are consultants that we've been working on the new airport terminal design with, and that's progressed now. We've seen a lot of very good progression with that project. We're to a point where the terminal is out for bid. It actually opens this week. The bids do open this week. But what this addendum specifically relates to is the contractual services with Mead and Hunt and some of the subcontractual services they've had to hire out since entering into the original contract with them. If you remember, the original design contract was a little over $3.1 million. This is addendum number 1 to that contract. The financial impact, as you'll see in the council summary, this addendum is eligible for the same AIP funding that we're receiving for the airport terminal design. And so the city's actual cost share for this addendum is a little under $2,500 because it would be split 90% federal, 5 state, and 5 local match on this. I know that Mitch Walker with Mead and Hunt is online. I'll hand it off to him, and he can explain a little bit more in detail about the cause and the logic behind the addendum, which is in the tune of $48,455.
All right, welcome,
Thank you,
Mitch.
Heath.
Thanks for being here, Mitch.
Absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity to sit in front of the council, I guess, by video. Wanted to address the addendum, as Heath had mentioned. The bulk of this project, of this addendum, is related to the landscaping portion of the project in and around the terminal building proper. So when we partnered with Helms Engineering out of Aberdeen, it was they would be doing civil landside and airside, and the Mead and Hunt team would be doing the terminal building. What we also realized then is that there were going to be a lot of landscaping components within that, especially landside site, that we wanted to address. And so we reached out to Confluence out of Sioux Falls and just putting together a proposal. I actually have their landscape design up front, and I do think it really sort of punches up the overall design. It really takes it from that, kind of that looking really nice to just looking really incredible. It's sort of a holistic approach here. So I'm going to share that if I have the ability to here. And again, this is representative of roughly 30, of the large portion of about $38,000 worth of design services. The other two are relatively minor. They are related to specifically baggage handling security. So BHS is what they call that, and that is just the TSA moving baggage around, getting it screened, and then out to the tug drive. There were some additional services incurred through the design of that. And then the last one was just additional soil borings, geotech. And so that is about $2,500, I believe, total. I'd be more than happy to discuss anything further if there are any questions, and can walk through kind of what the landscaping design is addressing, the needs that we felt were there, and why we reached out, or any questions related to baggage handling or geotech as well.
Okay, thank you. Council, are there any questions? Councilman Vilhauer?
Heath, this did get approval by the airport board at their meeting last week, correct?
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. This was brought before the airport board last week, and they did recommend approval for the change order, for the addendum.
Any other questions or comments? Say I'm glad to have a really nice professional landscape design for this, so thank you for that. I think it'll add a lot of value. If no one else has any questions, I'll take action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you, council. Appreciate it.
Item B is approval of a joint funding agreement for the operation and maintenance of gauging stations for the Upper Big Sioux River flood forecasting system with the United States Geological Survey, USGS, in the amount of $23,670. Have a motion by Helene, second by Vilhauer, and I would like Heath to tell us about this as well.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is an annual agreement that it's related to the operation and maintenance of the river gauges that we have in cooperation with USGS along the Big Sioux River, both upstream, near, and then downstream of our community of Watertown. This, like I said, this is an annual agreement, so this comes before the council every year. It is something that's budgeted for, and the city ends up, through this agreement, paying for 7 of the 12 gauging stations. The other 5 are covered by our cost-share partners, which include the USGS themselves, along with Coddington County, Lake Compesca Water Project District, and also South Dakota DENR. Pretty straightforward agreement here. I do have the map of the gauging station locations I'll share just for reference. These ones that are outlined in the red box indicate the gauging stations that the city's cost share goes towards maintaining throughout the year. And that's more or less a hands-off maintenance for as far as the city is concerned. Roger may have more knowledge on any of our use of those gauges, but it's pretty well USGS maintaining those for us, ensuring that they're operating correctly. The readings that we're getting make sense. We've actually gone through recent discussions with them over the last 2 years with the high water events that we had last year, and then the threat or the likelihood that we had this spring that we thought we were going to see a little worse outcome for. We were in close contact with USGS regarding the readout of these gauges and the units that they are read in, and trying to get them on a uniform and consistent basis. So they've been great to work with along those regards as well, and I thought I'd point that out too. So,
Right, thank you. Any questions, council? Councilman Vilhar?
Heath, I'm assuming that especially in high water years, the operation of these gauges is a critical aspect as far as our flood planning and mitigation around here.
it is, Councilman Vilhauer, and a lot of our flood preventive measures and our action plans are linked directly to the readings that we're getting at some of these gauges. Now, that's notwithstanding our own field observations, of course, but we do rely heavily on these gauges and the readings that they provide, and a lot of our action plans are built around them.
Anyone else? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Item C is approval of a feasibility of design agreement for services associated with the potential advanced biological nutrient recovery technology to be installed at the phosphorus removal facility with clear as water recovery in the amount not to exceed $50,000, authorizing the mayor to sign all applicable documents. I have a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Helene, and I will ask Heath to introduce this, please.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a kind of a information finding study that is really the next step that's necessary in moving forward with any phosphorus removal efforts or investments that we continue to make at the lake. As the council may or may not be aware, over the past few years, several years, through some of the studies we've done, and most recently the Lake Compesca Master Plan, phosphorus removal tends to be one of the highest community interests in seeing and helping the clarity of the lake waters that we have out at Lake Compesca. What this study does, it is a preliminary type study that would help quantify the feasibility to construct and establish a formal, larger scale phosphorus removal system at our lake. Roger Foote is here today. He helps head up the management of that as part of the Upper Big Sioux watershed project coordinator, and I'd defer to him here for some additional comments and background behind this, and then we'd help answer any questions you council might have.
Thank you, Heath. As most of you know, and I know there's some new faces on the council as well, back, I want to say close to 2011, 2012, we started looking at alternative methods of removing nutrients from Lake Compasca. As a part of that, we started looking into using algae as the medium to pick up nutrients in the lake water, because some of the dissolved nutrients are so tiny that they cannot be easily filtered, but algae is large enough to be filtered. This went through a 2.5, 3 year design phase, record searching phase, reports were written, questions were asked, trips were taken, and we came up with the phosphorus removal system as we have built it to this point. At the same time, what kind of really drove it was the decommissioning of the existing water filtration plant on Lake Compasca. So we had a location to start these plans to see if we could make something on our own that would actually benefit the lake. Starting in 2013 through 2016, we ran a 3-year pilot program with some pilot scale designs to see if the technology that we've come up with was feasible. In a nutshell, how this works is lake water is drawn from the lake. It's fed to a captive batch of algae. The algae take up the nutrients in the lake water. The water is filtered back, the algae is filtered back, and the cleaner lake water is returned to the lake. As you can imagine, with any type of experimental program, we went through some growing pains. The lessons learned, well, the list is very long and very rich. In the middle of this process, I did attend a conference in San Diego, one of the largest algae-based conferences in the country, if not the world. And I did meet up with a company called Clear as Water Recovery. They're based out of Missoula, Montana. And with discussions with them, they came out to visit. We did a tour of what we were doing, took a look at the results that we were getting, and said, hey, we're already doing this. And they're about, I'd say close to a light year ahead of me in technology design. And I was pretty happy with the conversations that we had, because my experience is civil engineering, design, dirt work, and diesel smoke, you know. And they come up with a chemical, biological process to make this happen. So, to make the story just a little bit longer, we contacted them and started swapping water samples back and forth. We're sharing technologies, we're looking at their system, and then we have asked them to come in and actually do a hard physical look at our facility to see if their system will fit our facility, and if not, what would it take to bring our pilot program up to industrial scale. The fastest that I could go with my system was about 60, 120 gallons a minute. Well, they're proposing a third of 1 million gallons of water a day. You know, so that's pushing it quite quickly. One of the beauties of the system is the excess algae developed in their system can be sold. We're exploring markets already. A lot of that will go to reusable plastics and decomposable plastics, so that a water bottle doesn't last 1,000 years in a landfill. It's gone in a few months. With the revenue that they're talking about being achieved from the sale of the excess algae is enough to cover operational costs of the facility. And then the benefit, of course, is clean water. Now, I know I've jumped around quite a bit, and I can see Glenn has a question, so please let me have it. I don't know how much into the details you want me to get. Our lake water runs about, 0.67 milligrams per liter in dissolved phosphates. They claim, and they've shown me, that they can remove up to 98% of that on a single pass through their photobioreactor system. There are pictures on the website of a plant similar to ours, not quite as big, that just went operational last week in the village of Roberts in Wisconsin. If you're interested, it's, what is it, www.clearaswater.com, and then look under their testimonials and you'll see referrals to that project. What else can I tell you about this? This feasibility of design will answer those questions. Can we really make this work in Watertown? What will it will cost, what those final costs will be, and what the long-term effects of that on lake water quality will be. I think with just those three objectives, it's well worth the $50,000 that we would like to spend on this.
All right. Councilman Billhauer.
Roger, did I understand you right, that there is a chance that our current facility out there might be able to be used versus starting from scratch?
Yes, and that's a big benefit. Obviously, the facility will have to be modified, but I don't believe that it'll have to be torn down completely.
Okay. Any idea, and I realize, you know, very, very early stages of this, I mean, if it does turn out that this is something that would be beneficial, what the cost would be, whether it's a new facility or refurbishing our current facility? I know we've kicked around some numbers in the past. Do you want to refresh us a little bit without scaring us too much?
What the heck? It's 2020. Just hang on, guys. The numbers that they've come up with so far from a feasibility report that they've done earlier is about the $4 million range. There again, that's it. I feel that would be an incredible investment in Watertown to improve the quality of the lake. I think long term it would pay for itself many times over. But $4 million is what they started out with. This feasibility design will narrow that down to what ought to get it pretty darn close before we get estimates.
Councilman Roby.
When you see a flow rate of 660 gallons per day, am I interpreting that you're going to pull that much in and that much goes out clean every day?
Correct.
Okay, so put that in perspective me on the lake. Does that mean you can clean the lake in 3 years for one full cycle? I don't know how many gallons the lake has in it.
Our one major competitor in anything that we do out there is Mother Nature. Through the years of 13, 14, 15, and 16, we went through a drought cycle where we had almost no input from the river system whatsoever. The nutrients, even the available nitrates that are in the lake water anyway, were starting to evaporate on their own through the nitrogen cycle. I actually had to add nitrogen to the system to get the algae to grow enough to remove the phosphate from the water system. So, how many years? I would like to say not. You can't really say that. If we got 3 great years in a row, we could hit our targets really fast. But then we get 2 years in a row like last year, and a lot of the nutrients come back in. But this system would be good enough to maintain a status quo so that it doesn't get worse, and then we can catch up in the dry years.
Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Roger. Question for you on the time of year. What months of the year would you be cycling water?
All of them.
All year?
Yes.
Are there any invasive species that are coming into these lakes that could affect that system, like zebra mussels? Has that been looked at?
Those scare me to death because they have such a nasty effect on infrastructure. They do tend to clog up pipes. That would have to be a design consideration when we do anything out there.
There's really not much you can do. I mean, we would plan to use the same intake, true?
Correct. The least infrastructure we have to create, the better.
Yeah. Councilman Hoyer?
Roger, just out of curiosity with this, I do think this is a strong, creative approach to it. You know, it's been proven multiple times in other areas. with the bill being what it is, I guess some of my concern is just what happens in the event that we do get a bunch of water and we start having those high flow years consistently. Could that money be better spent, or maybe do we need to start looking at other options too for just natural habitat and waterway restoration to get it back to being able to just, you know, police itself almost? I just don't know if there are those even feasible things to look at, or no, go ahead.
Okay. This is not the first thing that we've looked at. This was not the first, even the first choice. We looked at some membrane technology. Clark Engineering has a very strong scientists that have come up with some great membrane technology that does a wonderful job of removing this. But the problem with that one was the price tag was even higher. There's no recoverables with that one. We looked at running the plant as is, as a drinking water facility. There again, the inputs over time were greater than the algae system. We've put a lot of thought and discussion into this to try to, you know, is there a better way? We have these nutrients, they're not going to go away. Lake Kempesca is basically a bladder. When the river runs hot, it swells up. When the river goes down, well, the clean water pours off the top and down the river system it goes. So it will always collect nutrients from the river system. The Upper Big Sioux River Watershed Project for the last 20 years has attempted to implement and install clean water practices throughout the 245,000 acres that drain down into Lake Kempesca. We've spent well over $10 million, $11 million doing that already. And let's face it, it's a drop in the bucket of what needs to be done and the current farming practices and what is willing to be done in a volunteer type system.
Mayor, I have one more question, if you don't mind.
Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple other questions. Just so I understand, Roger, we're looking at $50,000 to study this, to get more information on some new techniques that could do this for. Am I right? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, this will tell us once and for all if we should drop the idea and walk away from it, or if it will work in a reasonable manner.
Just give me an idea what that $50,000 is spent to do. I mean, what takes place that costs $50,000? And then I have one other question, Roger.
Okay.
If I can pile on here for
Sure.
a moment. Are we kind of, in some sense, maybe putting the cart before the horse with this, not knowing what the Corps of Engineers is going to do in the future as far as any type of water maintenance up north? I mean, if it came to pass, again, that we had a dam proposal for, which is most likely, in my opinion, what's going to happen with the Corps up north, I think, would that have a major effect on this? I mean, would it make it, I would assume it'd make it easier, I don't know, for us to filter that algae out.
Second question first. This is my personal opinions, and it does not reflect any official government entity whatsoever that I may be involved with. But we haven't had results in 20-something years with the project up north. And the way the state of the country right now and the way COVID is, the way we're spending money to get Congress to actually kick those funds loose to actually do something in the next 20, I don't know if that's going to happen. I hope it does, because there is a water quality improvement to the lake with that. But if there's something that we can do now, and even if that structure is in place, it will slow down some sediments, but it is an open system. That water will come through eventually, and it depends on the final design. If it's designed so that it doesn't come over the pollution control weir, we'll be in good shape. If it does come over, well, then we still have the accumulation problem that we have now. Does that help? Okay.
Back to my original.
Okay, first part of the question.
Thank you.
This includes a site visit to review existing conditions, collect more water samples, meet with key decision makers, stakeholders, and conduct other on-site specific evaluations. Determine what components from previous decommissioned plant can be leveraged to be used for the advanced biological reactor facility. Identify capacity of components and determine whether upgrades and or repairs are required, including inspection, evaluation, existing influent pump station, concrete tankage, miscellaneous tankage, and electrical conduits present in and around the facility. A preliminary determination of structural integrity of the existing plant, identify potential codes that may be considered out of compliance with present-day regulations, and determine the most effective means of addressing those violations. Properly analyze the option of retrofitting the existing building versus a complete demolition. Note that it may be more cost-effective to simply start over. Detailed project concept, including but not limited to updated economics and construction estimates based on information gathered from the above bullet points. Drawings, layouts, overall project would include both in-scope facilities and out-of-scope improvements. And estimating budget for preliminary engineering report approximately, the 50,000. The schedule is, the report is likely to take 70 to 100 days.
Roger, I'm sorry, could you run that by?
No. Okay, I hate to read them to you guys, but that's.
I have a
Thank you,
question
Roger.
about the flow rate through the facility and what they base that upon. At the high end, 660,000 gallons per day, I did some rough calculations, about 33,000 days to cycle the full volume of Lake Kempesca, 90 years.
That seems a bit much.
That's at the high rate, so 180 years at the low rate. Where do those numbers come from?
We'll see that we don't have to do the entire volume of the lake. In order to dilute the dissolved phosphorus, total phosphorus levels enough to go from hypereutrophic down to eutrophic, we only need to do maybe a quarter of the volume of the lake to bring those levels down so that we get the clarity that we had. If you guys remember that 3-year drought period, 13, 14, 15, the lake water clarity was so great. I was getting all kinds of accolades of people were able to see the bottom of the lake from the end of their docks. And I'm like, I'd love to take credit for that, but it's just not me. But see, by removing a great portion of the nutrients, the lake has a better balance, ecologically speaking, and it clarifies. So we don't need to do the entire thing, just a good portion of it.
Mm-hmm. And we've looked into the possibility of dredging from a water quality perspective, and we've been told that we won't be eligible for funding assistance from grants until we stop the flow of pollutants into the lake, which means after a dam. So it would be the same thing here. I mean, we're sucking out the nutrients, but they're coming in pretty fast as well until we get a handle on that. That's something to consider. Councilman Rademski?
Question I have is, in your estimation over the last 10 years as to the efforts we've put into Lake Kempesca with what we've done for improvements, water quality over the last 10 years, what would you estimate the percentage of the water quality has gone up by?
Oh, it's difficult to put a percentage to that, but when I started with the project, I would say, 2002, we wouldn't get the clear water days. It was pretty much green, slimy mud hole, more or less. And then over the years, there has been major improvements with the amount of nutrients coming down the watershed system, with the erosion control around the lake, removal of the septic systems before my time. That had a huge impact. Yes, we've made a great impact, but we're not quite there yet. But it's difficult to put a percentage to that. And others here on the council have got probably better experience. They live right on the water, and I don't. If you'd like, anyone else would like to comment to that.
Can I
Sure.
follow up? I'm the liaison for the Upper Big Sioux Watershed District Board, and I've sat on that for over 5 years now. And when I see I don't get out there and monitor the water like you do, Roger. But when I see the work that has been done up and down the watershed and around the lake, as far as trying to control runoff and sediment and nutrients coming into the lake, it's got to have made a significant improvement, because there's an awful lot of farmers, landowners, et cetera, that have bought in and realized too the importance of trying to control what does come into the lake and erosion around the lake. But as far as a percentage, no, I would have no idea either how to answer that, Jason.
Councilman Roby?
You mentioned that once this is operational, the income or the revenue generated by selling the algae would probably cover the operating costs. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct.
When we looked at the whole plan for Lake Compesca, whether it be dredging or the alum treatments, everything costs money, nothing generated any funds. So it gives me a glimmer of hope, if you will, that we actually have an opportunity to, I wouldn't call it an enterprise fund quite yet, but a chance to generate some revenue in hoping that, those markets don't go away or we find other markets for algae. So that's a great statement to hear, and I hope you're confident it could do that, because that's the first thing we've heard in any lake treatments that actually brings any revenue in.
That's true, and we won't know until we embark upon some sort of study like this. We won't know what the potential is, and it's, not obligating us to build the facility just by going forward with this investigation. Councilman Lallam?
Thank you. Roger, on that, who's the purchaser of it? Is it a plastic company or something along those lines? I mean, are they located relatively close? Is it?
I've had personal contact with a company in Georgia, it was one of those contacts at a conference, and they basically flat out told me that we will buy every pound of algae that you can produce right now for as long as you can do it, because of their technology with the plastic water bottles.
Okay.
That was one out of 5 different ones that the 5 others I did not have direct contact with that were advertising for the same thing. And the quality of the algae that they were looking for, the standards were easy to meet.
Is the system, is it a sustainable system? Is it something that is constantly going to be under repair, or is it kind of a put in there type of deal? And
there will be maintenance, as with any type of photobioreactor. You can imagine cleaning tubes periodic. I think it was like a half an FTE, maybe to keep up with the maintenance.
Per year, I would take it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, have they given you any idea, how long has this company been around?
Oh, I knew someone was going to ask me a tough question. I want to say they've been working towards this for at least 10 years now.
Okay.
But I'd have to quantify that.
And kind of like to know how their systems have held up, in that process, if it's a 10-year, 15-year, things of that nature.
They started out with a pulp mill in Missoula, Montana, where they had some major environmental issues with the pulp mill, the holding ponds. That's where they got their start. They've now done pilot programs. Well, they're doing a big expansion to the wastewater treatment plant in Salt Lake City, Utah, where they're adding on a whole cell to a wastewater treatment plant. This one in Wisconsin that just came online now is the kind of the latest generation, but they are only going at about half the speed that we would be doing, but then they only have half the nutrient issues that we're after. Or no, I'm sorry, twice the nutrient issues that we have, so they can go slower. The more concentrated things are, the easier they are to remove. As far as longevity, we are on the edge. So it's really hard to tell what 20 years will it make that. I can't answer that right now, but I would think so.
It looks like I pulled up their site. It looks like they're in Duluth as well, and then they're working on some at University of Illinois. As current projects, at least, is what they're showing on their site.
And they were founded in 2008, so they've been around for 12 years.
12, okay.
Oh, good. I guessed about right.
So that's my concern is it a company is this such a new technology that we're kind of jumping in both feet, and how does that take us?
Yes, but we're not first.
Right. At least got a couple of other.
We're not the guinea pigs on this.
Yeah.
We're taking the lessons learned and going forward with that.
And if they are doing this, is this something where they're constantly trying to upgrade their systems as well as trying to figure out, different ways? I mean, we're talking about how long it would take to clean our lake. Is there other items that we can do to, speed that up, or is that the capacity that we're going to have?
We are pretty unique with using the technology for a lake. Most of their focus has been on wastewater treatment. So this a lake body would be a new type of application for them. The same technology, but a newer application.
Okay.
There's a lot of interest in this technology.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we can't be the only ones
No.
with a phosphorus issue.
Councilman Vilhar?
Just a couple of comments. First of all, this study has been budgeted in our 2020 budget, correct, as I understand it? I read the information. And secondly, if we're ever going to ever pay more than just lip service to protecting and preserving our lake, we've got to make an investment, something like this, to see what our options might be. So I guess I would encourage us that. I know 50,000 is like you say, pretty good sized dough there, Michael, but I would encourage us to go ahead and make this investment to see where we go from here with the lake.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Councilman Albertson?
Thank you, Mayor. I had several questions there, but I think most of them have been answered now. And maybe, Roger, let's say that this comes out, the study comes out very positive. What might be the next cost that would be associated down the road? Let's say this survey goes for the next 6 or 8 months. Then where are we? What would be the next thing that's in line financially, at least? I've heard the rest of it, but financially.
We have placed on the CIP for, I believe it's 23, 24, $2 million for each year for the construction of this facility. We are assuming that everything is going to come back just fantastic and everyone's going to want to go for it. Once this study is completed and we have a really solid cost estimate of what it would cost to build, that will also give me additional horsepower to start fundraising and finding partners to go along with us on it. But as of right now, $4 million is the construction costs that we're looking at in 23 and 24.
Councilman Lallam?
Roger, have they given you any indication of what kind of operating costs this is going to go forward with?
When the plant was operational during my 3-year experimental program, the monthly cost was roughly about $1,500 a month. That was with purchasing nitrogen fertilizer, carbon dioxide, operational electricity, keeping the plant warm enough not to freeze up. With this system, we'll be pumping a little more with additional lights. So I would say it can't be a whole lot more than that, but then it could be $2,000 a month. It could be more. It could be less. I really don't know until the equipment is installed.
Anyone else? All right, we have a motion and second. I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 7 is old business. Do we have any old business? Not seen any. Is there any new business? This is where we have the presentation from AE2S Nexus, the recommendations on the research completed for the wastewater and solid waste utility rate study. And I see Kevin Smith is here, but Heath, would you please introduce the whole topic for us, please?
Yes, absolutely, Mayor. Thank you for that. So as the council recalls, we did enter into contractual services with AE2S to perform a comprehensive utility rate study for both the wastewater utility and the solid waste utility that or the solid waste enterprise fund that the city manages. I would note that Kevin Smith is the project manager for AE2S that's been helping us with this along with his team, and they've put together a pretty comprehensive report here for us this evening that he'll summarize. I'd also like to note Marcy Luno, our engineer 1, is our internal project manager. And Marcy, you can feel free to join Mike or Kevin up at the table there if you'd like. And then Mike Berger, the wastewater and solid waste superintendent, is also online with us this evening to help answer any questions. little bit more to this background is that we have had a small committee that's been made up of a few council members, as well as the internal staff and the consultants. And we've walked through several of the scenarios and recommendations here and the practices and policies and procedures that we currently follow regarding our wastewater rates and our solid waste rates. And I think we've come up with a pretty good comprehensive recommendation here that AE2S is providing us. And that's what we'd like to present to the full council tonight for their consideration. And any discussion we take out of this meeting, of course, we'll go back to the drawing board as necessary and make any amendments or modifications to that plan accordingly. But with that being said, I'll hand it over to Kevin, and he can go through his presentation here.
Thanks, Heath. First, I'd like to thank Heath and Marcy and Mike and their staffs for the amount of homework they did as part of this project as well. So this is, as Heath said, it was very much a team effort that we held, I think, 4 very in-depth progress meetings with a group of city staff and elected officials to bring us to this point. So it's been very much an interactive process, which I personally appreciate, because then, we feel as though it's something that the city owns, that it isn't just a consultant telling you this is what we think you should do, a one size fits all, that we recognize and have had the benefit of your staff's time and expertise to learn more and to find, come up with recommendations that really are suited just for the city of Watertown, although we use standard processes for rate setting and rate analysis. So with that, I just thought, for purposes of everyone's...
Can I interrupt one second?
Sorry.
I want to share it with the rest of the group on Teams here. So give me 1 second here and I'll go back to it.
Oh, that's all right.
There we go. Now the rest of the team can see.
One of the things I think sometimes gets overlooked when we jump into rate analyses is why do we do this at all? Why do communities consider rate adjustments, and when? So this is an excerpt from a utility rate survey that our company does every year, and we survey around, I think, 275 communities and systems in the north central part of the country. So this is a very, I'd say, it's a good picture of what the costs or what the charges have been over the last 17 years for water and wastewater. And water is blue and wastewater is green on this. And you can see that since 2003, and these are average charges for 6,000 gallons of wastewater and water, but it's, I would say, over doubled over those last 17 years. And that is because the costs of operating these enterprise funds, these businesses, has continued to increase, whether that's your operational costs, like electrical, and your personnel costs, or on the solid waste side, fuel costs for the vehicles and the equipment to pick up garbage, pick up the MSW, pick up recyclables, whatever. It just shows that as time goes on, these businesses are getting more expensive to own and operate. So on an annual basis, when we produce this, it's interesting to see if the CPI is keeping up with it or not. And frankly, these enterprise funds, these utilities, are businesses. They're generally self-sustaining, that revenues and expenses have to generally balance, and it isn't the same as running a general fund operation. So keep in mind that you're running businesses here, so you should, as prudent business owners, look at your costs, look at your expenses on a very regular basis, and see if you're keeping up, and then project out, well, what are we going to need? What do we need to do next year to keep the doors open and to serve the public? Because these are businesses that just you can't close the doors on them. frankly, that as long as the community is here, these businesses are going to be in operation. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense that on a regular basis, you take a look at your costs and revenues, expenses and revenues. So we've gone through what I think is a 6-task process with your city staff. It began with a kickoff meeting where we looked at the data and we talked to your staff about best practices. We looked at revenue requirements. What does it cost to run the wastewater system and the solid waste program for a year? And really the cost of service analysis boils down to who benefits from those services. And in the case of wastewater, it's residential, commercial, and industrial customers. And on the solid waste side, you've got your residential pickup of solid waste and recyclables, and then the tipping fees for commercial haulers. So then we looked at different rate designs and bill impacts, so we could show you and your staff, well, what does that all mean to the people paying the bills? Who's getting those utility bills on a monthly basis? And then I think what will be the most, I hope the most helpful portion of this is the solid waste financial plan and the wastewater financial plan that gives you an idea or a look into the future on what some upcoming costs are and how your staff will be planning for the future. Now, how are we going to fund those projects? What sort of reserve targets and things have we established so that you have the confidence that those utilities, those businesses are being well managed and well planned for, that it's not just a year by year, but it does really require a longer view. So this is a general slide about the cost of service analysis, and really the bottom part of the slide where it shows the results. Generally speaking, to deliver a utility service to residential customers, commercial customers, or industrial customers, it's different. Sometimes you get more of your revenue from residential customers, but then they generate more of the expenses because there's more miles of water main to serve them. So we like to see, when we're going through a cost of service analysis, are your rates right now within plus or minus 10% of what it's costing you to provide that service to your customers? And the good news is, when we went through the COSA analysis with your staff, we found that the rate structures on both wastewater and on solid waste are generally within that 10% plus or minus tolerance. So we didn't see the need to completely revamp your rate design or your rate system. That's the good news. So I think look back on how your systems have been managed financially and operationally, and from a rate structure standpoint, things were looking pretty good. So rate recommendations for wastewater, single family and multifamily apartment rates, generally, as I said, maintain the existing structure, but right size the fixed charge. And you charge on a 100 cubic feet basis. So 1 CCF is 100 cubic feet. That equates to 748 gallons, in case anyone's interested. But you charge per CCF. We looked at generally about a 3 CCF average, or something like the 40th percentile of your residents fall in this 3 CCF range. So when we looked at the wastewater rate for them, we adjusted the charge to that. I think previously the assumption was that it was on 7 CCF, but that it showed that that was really much higher than actuality. Commercial and industrial rates, again, maintain the existing structure, right size the volume included with the commercial base charge, and we'll get into that in a moment. Just a little bit about strength charges, that you've got biochemical oxygen demand, BOD. You've got total suspended solids, TSS, and then you've got NH3 ammonia. These are strength factors or strength components of generally industrial wastewater that you charge extra for to industrial users. You have a formal industrial pretreatment program that is an expense. So we looked at, well, who should be paying for that? And generally it came out to be about 70% of the expense of that industrial pretreatment program should be going directly to industrial customers. There's a certain component to that that goes to residential customers as well. But again, right-sizing the rates and recognizing who benefits from certain parts of your system, not just the physical collection and treatment system, but some of these other things that are true costs to the system. Those should be associated with the users who benefit. And when we talk about, and down at the bottom, this readiness to serve, that is, I think, generally a policy matter to discuss or something to keep in mind for the future, that if you have people who connect and disconnect, whether they're snowbirds or just vacancies, if someone disconnects for 3 months or 6 months and then wants to reconnect, that readiness to serve, your infrastructure is still there ready to serve them. That's an expense that you continue to have. So in the future, you might want to think about a fee for that. It might not be large or generate a lot of revenue, but it's an acknowledgement that you've made the investment in the system. Therefore, anyone who benefits from it, whether they are permanent users or sometimes users, that they maybe should pay for that.
Yeah, Kevin, if I could.
Excuse me, the service. Sorry, Heath.
If I could chime in on that slide, because I think this is one of the behind the scenes components to this study that I really would commend AE2S's work on, rather than just looking at the 35,000 foot elevation of where our rate should be based on our operation and capital needs. They really did dive deep into all the factors involved in our rates, and that right sizing, that to me was an important step in that process in order to make sure we are right sizing our rates for the general residential customer base that we have, and then also the commercial and industrial customer base that we have. I just wanted to commend AE2S for their work on that and taking that level of detail into account for that right sizing considerations that we have in this proposal.
Thanks for pointing that out, and it just kind of goes back to those 4 different progress meetings we had with your staff and all the homework they did to participate, that this is really a rate that, not to fast forward to the end, but rate design and rate suggestions that are fair and equitable to your residential customers. Yes, sir.
How do we currently handle the people that go away for a season or for a few 3 or 4 months at a time?
Mike, Mr. Berger, could you chime in on that? I don't know the answer off the top of my head. But.
Yep. Could you repeat the question? That didn't come in very clear.
Sure. For the snowbirds, as they refer to, those that leave for, let's say, an extended period of time, 3 or 4 months, what happens now? There was talk of this readiness to serve and charging a fee for that. How do we handle those scenarios today?
One moment here. It's coming in kind of garbled. I'm sorry. I really can't make out the question.
I can try to answer it.
Yeah.
Mike, if you can hear me, this is Sarah. If you can hear me
Yep.
and I say something wrong, please jump in and correct me. But we do allow people to disconnect for a short period of time. And it's kind of a struggle. It's not something that we like doing. It creates issues. But I think we have been allowing it. Mike, is that true? Could you hear me?
Yes, they do allow you to disconnect for a period of time. And we actually don't handle that into the department, so I'm not, and there's been some changes to that policy over the years, so I'm not sure where we are, but yes, you can shut off services.
Well, and I think, you know, when we talk about adding that as a part of the fixed charge, that could be a policy discussion later for the mayor and council, is if you add a small amount onto the fixed charge without charging everyone individually, there is that de minimis factor of it's costing us more to manage a program than it is to get the revenue. Maybe that's something that you just provide, or you allow, or you acknowledge with those individual accounts, but it's part of the fixed charge. So it would kind of address the issue without having to make it a whole new program and hire an FTE to run that.
Right, and I know part of the issue has been, well, the water department physically comes out, closes a valve, turns off the water, but we've got sump pumps that people rely upon. They don't want their house flooding while they're down in Arizona or whatever. Yeah. So the sewer's actually maybe still working. And I, to be honest, don't know how we've handled that either.
I don't know that it's capped off. But
no, it's definitely
right.
not. We don't have any valve on the sewer that will
right,
close.
and we're not suggesting that. But to the heart of the matter, though, you still have the ability to serve. That property still has access to
They are still receiving service.
Yes.
Quick follow-up. So there's no charge to disconnect. Is there a charge to reconnect?
Yes, I think there is. And I think there actually is a charge to disconnect because someone physically comes out and turns a valve.
For water.
For water. And then they have another charge to come back out again and turn it back on. But for the sewer part of it, I mean, we're kind of along for the ride, and we haven't been charging for the sump pump collection when people have had variances to discharge their groundwater from around their foundation into the sanitary sewer. That goes all winter long normally. So definitely a topic we need to talk about.
That when anybody leaves town and they shut off their water, then they quit billing the service. And so, like the mayor said, there's a valve to shut off the water. There's no valve on the sewer, but there is a small reconnection charge of, I haven't dealt with it for so long, I don't recall, but it's just a few dollars because you have the administrative work of sending the emails and going through finance to municipal utilities to reinitiate the billing and make sure everything's reinstated. So there is a small fee, just a few dollars.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question enough, Don?
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. So on to the recommended approach for residential. This table shows the current monthly charge in 2020 and then the suggested charges for 2021. So we've got it broken down into fixed operation and maintenance cost and then fixed debt costs. So you see that fixed O&M costs for a residential customer in 2020 are $12.51 a month. Recommendation is to increase that by $3.10 a month per residential account. And that, again, it goes back to the cost of service. What is it costing you to provide that service to residential customers? And how can we recapture those expenses through revenues? There's no change to the fixed debt component because that is established really based on your SRF loan covenants, and provided you're meeting that 110% coverage, there's no need to adjust that up. So as long as you're meeting your SRF debt requirements, that's why that one doesn't change. So the total fixed amount from 2020 to 2021 is $3.10, recommended at $3.10 per month. And I'll show you just generally where that puts you. So that first graph that I showed you of an excerpt from the utility rate survey that we do every year, this graph is also an excerpt from that utility rate survey. This is just South Dakota systems showing where you're currently at, and with the excuse me, the 2021 adjustment, if approved, would still keep you about in the same position at, $2 less than the next highest system. You will see that there's some systems that have fixed charges and variable charges. We're not recommending a modification to that for the city of Watertown right now, but excuse me, if you want to get an idea of what does everyone else, at least class 1 municipalities in South Dakota pay, you can see across the board. Now, this comes with an asterisk or a series of asterisks that some of these systems, Brandon, for example, they don't treat their own wastewater. They pump their wastewater to the city of Sioux Falls, and they are charged system development charges, SDCs, plus they have to pay their own pumping costs. City of Harrisburg is in the process of designing and constructing their own mechanical wastewater treatment plant right now. They also deliver wastewater to the city of Sioux Falls, and they have their own lagoon system. So this is not to indicate everyone has the same kind of treatment technology that the city of Watertown does. But if you want to see what, or if you want to know what residential customers pay typically in South Dakota, this is where you are now. This is where you would move up to in 2021 with a rate adjustment. Any questions about that one?
Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have one question. The recommendation that you'd mentioned earlier, the $3.10 for as a fixed cost addition, is that something, would it be a similar rate increase yearly then in your estimation? As we move forward, would we take it year by year and make that decision?
That's a great question, and the short answer is no. This is a one-year rate adjustment recommendation. We do, as part of the financial plan, I'll show you that graph towards the end, but our recommendations, or what we've worked on with staff, is to get down to what I'd call a CPI inflationary adjustment in the out years, so that if electricity and if other costs that you have to bear, those increase, that you incrementally do that on a very much smaller basis, I guess, is the way I would couch that. Heath, you have any other thoughts?
Other than that, that's a perfect example, Councilman Bueller, of some of the discussions we had with the committee. I know this is something the Finance Officer, Kristen Bobzien, and I talked about with the committee. And, the importance of keeping up on this on an annual basis so that those adjustments, it's incremental over time. And obviously, when you do that annually, it lessens the blow of the overall impact when you need to make a correction or make an increase due to the ongoing increase of the cost to operate the systems. So we would anticipate, just as Kevin indicated, taking into account that the operational expenses annually and adjusting those rates accordingly on an annual basis at a much smaller percentage of an increase that keeps it a little bit more palatable, if you will, to the system users.
Yes.
Being part of that group that put this together, when was the last time that we did adjust rates? I think that'd be helpful to know when we last adjusted our rates, because it's been quite some time, right?
Yes, I believe it has. And again, I don't know the exact date. Kevin or Mike, if you have that information off the top of your heads.
I think it might have been 2010.
That's what I've had in my mind. It's been about 10 years. I know I had expressed concern that although it's only $3, it is 11-12% increase that first year. But I think it's important to keep in mind that, one, we haven't had an adjustment for a long time, and secondly, even with that adjustment in that first year, we're still would have the lowest rates in the state. So we're going to get some pushback percentage-wise, probably even dollar-wise, $3. But I think to keep it in perspective, I think it's a time that we definitely have to do this.
And one of the things that we didn't really, and I don't even have a slide on this today, but we will deliver a rate model to you that Heath and Marcy and Kristen and Mike and Craig can all use on an annual basis. And we're not, You don't need to go through a full-blown rate analysis every year, but there is value in having that rate model so that as capital improvements come and go, that you're able to, with your own staff, use that to forecast what your needs are. So there's always an opportunity to provide support to you, but what we really like to see when we finish up rate studies is a self-sustaining utility that we can deliver this, the spreadsheet-based rate model that your own staff can use, so that every year as you're going through your budget review that you've got kind of the projection or the updated numbers from, well, these were the actual operating expenses, these were our actual capital expenses, and then continue to project that out. So, even if you just look at the rates annually and ask, where are we at, revenues and expenses, I think that's a very valuable exercise for communities to do. And that's one of the things you'll be able to do when we're not in the room and you've got your own staff managing it afterwards. So the commercial rate is a little bit different. This is, again, is based on the fixed O&M costs of 300 cubic feet, I should say, 3 CCF, which is 748 times 3, and if you want it in gallons. So again, the fixed O&M charge would go from $12.51 to $15.64. The fixed debt charge would not change, so that the total fixed cost per month would be $27.30. The difference with, one of the differences between commercial and residential is because there's, I think, more variability in commercial accounts and the amount of water that they use, that there is a volumetric rate for those businesses. So essentially any flows in excess of 3 CCF, that the total volumetric charge would go from $2.40 a CCF to $2.89 or 49 cents per CCF in excess of 3 CCF. And remember, this is 748 gallons of flow per CCF, and that's a 49 cent per CCF increase, which is reasonable. So there is a volumetric component to commercial, and as we'll show on the commercial side, this is where you're currently at 60, and this is based on 18,000 gallons of flow. So this would be what I would say typical commercial bill across the geographies that we survey. So from 65 up to 80, just over $80 or $85, I believe, is where you would land in 2021. And one of the things that we could do, or you may want to do because you have a much smaller number of commercial accounts, is if anyone questions like, well, how does this affect me? It's pretty easy to run what a calculated utility bill would be for an individual business, and that's possible. If there's questions from the commercial side on what they're paying for wastewater.
Okay.
But again, this is, you look at the range of wastewater charges, and there's one other community, Harrisburg is not on this, but I believe theirs is in excess of what Brandon is in terms of the commercial charges for the year. So it's not meant to be a comparative process, but if you're wondering generally what does it cost to treat wastewater in South Dakota for Class 1 communities, this is a pretty good example. And on the industrial side, going from left to right, we've got, again, the fixed O&M costs, fixed debt costs. Fixed O&M cost is recommended to go up $9.60 a month, and this includes 7 CCF, recognizing that your industrial users are not domestic only. There's a lot of processed water being used. So for that fixed monthly fee, it covers about 7 CCF of usage. Flows in excess of 7 CCF, the total volumetric charge would go up from $4.42 to $5.32, or 90 cents per CCF in excess of 7. And then this is where I get to tie in my earlier statement about the strength charges. So unique to industry that you typically don't see with residential or commercial are the high strength surcharges for BOD, TSS, and NH3, which are the smell, the solids, and other things in that industrial wastewater. Your community has to have, you're mandated to have an industrial pretreatment program to sample these users, and that's a real cost to you, which is why there are specific charges to those. So these are shown in excuse me, milligrams per liter, and also dollars per pound in 2020. And your wastewater staff is actually able to measure this because they do sampling of those industries. They don't have, you don't do this for every residential customer, but you do it for industry. So the change for BOD to go from 33 cents a pound up to almost 34 cents a pound. For total suspended solids, that is unchanged, and for ammonia, it goes up from $1.18 to $1.23, almost $1.24 in the limits. So again, what Heath said earlier, mentioned about the in-depth analysis that your staff and our staff went through to come up with these numbers. We feel very confident that what you're charging for those high strength wastes and just generally wastewater in overall are very fair, very equitable, and match the cost of service that you're investing to provide that to your customers.
Kevin, if I could quick interject. Madam Mayor, just for the sake of time, we do have only 10 minutes left till the regular council meeting starts. Kevin's got quite a bit of information to cover. Are we okay running a little past at 5:30, or how do you want to handle that, Mayor? Just so Kevin can gauge his discussion.
I can speed it up too.
Yeah, we need to give the council a little break, so if we can wrap it up soon, that'd be good.
I will.
Thank you.
I won't be redundant when we get through solid waste, but generally, what we evaluate when we're looking at financial plans, I consider it like financial planning you do for yourself and your families. That you look at things like, what does it cost to run the house? What is my mortgage? What am I saving for? Whose car am I going to have to replace next? To generalize it down to a utility, that is what we look at for wastewater, and then subsequently for solid waste. The kinds of reserves we look at: operating reserves, debt service reserves, capital reserves, and then rate stabilization funds, and that's kind of the rainy day fund. And this is where we spent an awful lot of time with your staff talking about what are reasonable policy or reasonable levels to try to achieve, so that we're not seeing double-digit rate increases every year, but yet we acknowledge that we need to build up some reserves, because you're going to have capital costs well into the future. You want to be prepared to make those decisions about when is it prudent to go into the debt market, to go look at bonds versus, can we pay for this on our own? Can we pay for this out of rates? That's one of the purposes of having reserves, is so you can make those decisions from a business sense in the future and not be locked into, well, we don't have any reserves, we have this big capital cost, so all we can do is go get a loan, which is, then you just add to your debt surcharge and you end up paying more anyway. So this is one of my favorite graphs of all time, because it shows that projection. And even though this is a 1-year rate adjustment that's being recommended for wastewater, it gives you an idea of what some projected rate adjustments could be in the future, and how you can gradually increase your reserves so that when those capital costs come along and when you have to expand or make other improvements, that you have the funds on hand to make those decisions. And, you know, just if you look at the capital reserve, which is the red bar, these are projections again. If you look in 2027 and 2029, those are actually dipped. They're dipped a little bit. And that's because when we've talked to Mike, he said, well, I've got a digester rehab in 2027. I've got a screw press improvement that we think we're going to have in 2029. We'd like to pay for those out of capital reserves and not have to go to SRF. So we're trying to give you a snapshot into the future that acknowledges some of the capital costs that your staff has seen coming, but also gives you the flexibility of knowing you can pay for things out with debt, or you can pay for them out of capital reserves. And back to your question, Councilor Bueller, about will we see double-digit rate adjustments? If you look at the purplish bar, you see the recommended rate adjustment for 2021, and then beyond 2022, they are very modest, and yet you're continuing to accrue cash reserves to fund future projects. So I guess from where we see the future right now is very modest increases in the future and still keeping pace with what your operational and capital needs are.
One more quick question, if I may.
Councilman Bueller.
Thank you. Kevin, I'm just curious, if they have this kind of, if they have these resources banked because of these increases, how does that affect grant applications down the road? Because now when we have projects, we go and we search out grant opportunities wherever they might be, and how does that work? If the money's there, it makes it easy to say, hey, we made all these rate increases, the money's in the bank, we've got this extra money to work with these capital projects.
You know, just generally on the utility side, most utilities your size right now in your position are looking at SRF loans anyway. So those are, I wouldn't say independent of where your rates are at, but one of the things the SRF folks will look at when you apply is your ability to repay. And do you have your rates set high enough that you can meet that 110% debt coverage? And I think there have been times where the Board of Water and Natural Resources has said, Community X, you need to raise your rates because we're not sure you can repay your loan. Yeah. So I think this, not that you're going to negate the possibility of grants in the future, I would say more on the SRF loan side, you're actually setting yourself up to be better positioned if and when you choose to go to look for additional loans. Yeah. I'm moving on to sump pumps. Yeah. Sump pump variants, talked about this a little bit a while ago. Right now, sump pump discharge into your collection system does cost. It is a charge that you're not, it is a cost you're not charging for. What we're recommending is a seasonal charge for anyone who does discharge into their floor drain from November 15th to March 15th, $100. And even with 500 residents who would, you know, charge or connect to that, that is still, I would say, in a sense, not really paying for the capacity that's taking up in your system. I don't see this as a convenience charge. I see this as recognition that there's capacity being taken up in the collection system. And, you know, as time goes on, there may be other opportunities to do things like implement sump pump collection systems with stormwater funds to take that stormwater out of your collection system. But for the time being, we understand that, especially in the wintertime, it's necessary. However, you shouldn't be providing that service at no charge. Moving on to solid waste, I will get through this quickly, Mayor, I promise. We looked at the same cost of service analysis that we did with wastewater generally, Heath, I would say. Our recommendations for residential collection for garbage and recycling. In 2020, it's $10.50. 2021 and 2022, we're recommending $1 per month for each of those 2 years to bring it up to $12.50 in the year 2022. Tipping fees, on the other hand, on the other side of the slide there, recommending charges per ton on MSW, municipal solid waste, and these are fees that are paid at the scale at the landfill by commercial haulers. So $37.50 per ton is what they pay now. Recommendation in 2021 and 22 is to go to $42 or a $4.50 per ton charge. Also increasing the out of area surcharge from $9.50 to $14, another $4.50 per ton increase. $2.50 per ton increase in yard waste and inert, which is leaves, branches, etc. So that would go from $22 a ton to $24.50, and also with white goods, $22 to $24.50 a ton there. So these, again, we went through a cost of service analysis in depth with Mike and your staff to see what does it cost to actually manage the collection system as well as managing the landfill itself, the landfill operation. This is where you are today. This is where you would be next year. And you'll see that there's communities like Sioux Falls who are not on here. One of the reasons Sioux Falls isn't on here is because they don't have municipal pickup. They have 20-some licensed haulers, and it is a different ball game in terms of what monthly fees are, what monthly costs. So that's not included in here. But again, for the landfills and the municipal systems that we surveyed, this is where you are today and where you would be in 2021, and then a little higher in 2022 with those recommendations. This is just for your residents. Same slides I used essentially for the wastewater solid waste financial plan. One of the differences here when we get to the financial planning process itself actually is those red bars. Those are for land reserves. And that, I'm not going to say that's untouchable revenue that gets set aside, but that's the money you need to set aside for future acquisition. And, you know, that's different than what you would see at a wastewater treatment plant or a water treatment plant, is they typically don't have those reserves set aside. Something I'd also like to point out when we talk about municipal solid waste charges increasing, you saw it was $1 a month per residential account, and yet on the commercial side it was in the $4.50 a ton. Part of that has to do with the understanding that the city of Watertown owns and operates this regional landfill, right? And that brings with it responsibilities that you all are charged with. Your residents are going to have well into the future. There are closure and post-closure costs that the EPA is going to continue to enforce. And therefore, anyone who comes from outside of the city of Watertown who brings their solid waste to your regional landfill, they have the benefit of that. They don't have that liability long-term that you do. So keep in mind when you think of our landfill costs, you're also providing a service to people outside the community who won't have that legal responsibility, even after the landfill is closed, to maintain it, to do the sampling, to manage methane, all of those things. So there is a differential in cost because they don't have the long-term investment that you do. So if there's any questions from haulers, from your own residents, I hope you all keep that in mind when it comes to solid waste. So these are, I just wanted one closure slide with all of the things we've talked about. Again, we feel we went through a fairly exhaustive process with your staff. It was a lot of fun We got to know them. They probably got to know us and our quirks a little more than they wanted to, but this is stuff that we like to do, and I really do like to see communities have a financial plan and feel confident that your staff is thinking about your financial future. So with that, I'll close, and hopefully I'm close, Mayor.
Thank you. You're real close. Appreciate that. Council, any quick questions? Councilman Vilhauer?
I guess Heath or Marcy, what's the next step, timetable, et cetera? Kind of walk us real quickly through that.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Vilhauer. You know, we would take any comments, suggestions, or questions that the council had this evening that they'd want us to consider before bringing forward the appropriate, is it resolution or ordinance? I believe we're going to go resolution with the adoption of the new rates that we bring forward for proposal for adoption. We can also discuss any adjustments or amendments at that time as well when the resolution comes forth. But Marcy, I'd defer to you. Timeline on bringing that resolution forth, do we have that outlined in our schedule?
By November, we plan to bring this to council with the resolution. That was our original intention with our RFP that went out to our consultants. And AE2S was right in line with that. Presentation was about one council meeting off, so we're still on track to meet the November deadline.
Great.
And I could remind that this information was shared to the entire council. We'll also forward that to the press too, Marcy, if we didn't do that earlier, but just so they have the slideshows for their records. And if the council would have any questions between now and then, please feel free to get a hold of myself or Marcy, and we'll handle them accordingly.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there any other new business? All right, we do not have time to go into executive session, so we won't, pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2, and there being no further business on the agenda, I declare us adjourned, and we'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back for the council meeting.